From Country Cafe in Houston, Chicago, this is One of the World News Live! Hello and welcome to the show. Today's program is brought to you by Homan's Homemade Rodent Blender. Have you ever thought to yourself, what use do I have with my rats? Well, blend them up into a nutritional paste and send little Billy or Sally to school happy. Oh boy, that's good. Oh. You know, I'm sorry guys, I can't really lie to you. That wasn't really rat. That would be disgusting. No. Rather, for the purpose of this show, we actually use possum. Because fuck possums, right? Rats make good pets, while possums scare the shit out of you because their eyes glow in the alley. Well, I'm excited. You know why I'm excited? Because, if you haven't noticed, there's going to be a fucking band today. That's right. We've got an action-packed show today. After covering the main stories, we will have the opportunity to sit down with the boys from Karma Wears White Ties. And then we'll enjoy a music performance from them, which is a poorly kept secret because you're not blind. That's right. We here at ITW like to treat our audience right. You're special, each and every one of you. We've got some good news this month. The Senate Intelligence Agency found that the CIA has been covering up years of prisoner abuse at Guantanamo Bay that was used unsuccessfully to gather information from Al-Qaeda prisoners. Agents found that guards in the prison often were waterboarded and were also forced to listen to Barney songs and the Meow Meow Mix theme song. Also, the prisoners that chose to go on food strike were often force-fed through their rectum. Which, in Germany, the whole rectum thing is often a popular sex game. And let me tell you, when I went to Germany, it didn't feel like a game. I'm talking to you, Hans Jagerbout. This torture of prisoners in Guantanamo is so childish. This shows how something that starts with good intentions, like responding to 9/11 and responding to a crisis of trying to protect our people, really could go so wrong. It's like these fucking people working at Guantanamo are children. Hey, yeah, let's torture them and make them listen to the Barney song. Oh, and they're on food strike? Well, let's stick a tube up their butt. This is good that there was a report filed on this because it shows a high degree of transparency, which will disavow this kind of torture behavior going forward. Good news from the Labor Department, we added 300,000 new jobs in November with a sharp jump in hourly wages. 2014 has seen the best increase in payroll since the late 1990s. Yeah, jobs are good. Speaking of money, as some of you know, Obama took a whirlwind trip across Asia this fall. The journalists that joined the president received a bill of $90,000. That's the most expensive trip for the White House press in history. Listen, I told my fellow journalists that the minibar wasn't free. Obama isn't going to let you drink on his tab. And the souvenirs from the Great Wall, overpriced. The job thing is good, but inflation will soon follow. And apparently our leaders spend money like a 9-year-old on mom's iPhone. But in order to get to the point where we get to listen to some kick-ass tunes, we gotta discuss some things that might be uncomfortable. If you haven't used the restroom, now might be a good time. The staff at La Katrina is competent at cleaning up messes, but whatever may come out of you tonight will have to be handled by you, and only you. Also, if there are any children in the room, Make sure to blind them or block their hearing. Use force if necessary. Their grubby little fingers are like flower petals. But don't let them fool you. I kid. This is a family-friendly show that deals with incredibly unfriendly stories. That's our PSA. Now let's turn the hot stove and get to the headlines. In Fuck Yeah News, the Girl Scouts of USA have approved digital cookie. That's right, for the first time ever, Girl Scouts will now be learning e-commerce through selling their delicious as fuck cookies online. Now, I can safely buy Girl Scout cookies with no pants on and not get a lawsuit. Holy fuck, did you see that Star Wars trailer? Well, if not, the Star Wars trailer for Episode 7, The Force Awakens, was seen by 40 million pant shitters in 3 days. Now the question is, how does Disney extend this orgasm till next December's release date? I've only got so much juice. We here at WITW would like to gladly welcome our neighbors from the north, Canada, to Twitter. The new Twitter will allow the country to offer the world a window into everything Canadian. So, what does that mean? Well, let me share a few tweets with you. At Canada. Be careful, folks. Troopers saw a moose on the road. Hashtag oh gosh. At Canada. Good news. The moose has now entered the brush. Hashtag sorry. Hashtag oh gosh. At Canada. Anyone seen the Canucks game today? We forgot to TiVo it. At Canada. Seriously, what's the score of the Canucks game? At Canada. Yes, poutine tastes better after smoking our marijuana. At Canada. Get ready, Americans. The Canada Goose are coming to poop on your front lawn. Hashtag suck it. And finally, at Canada. Avril Lavigne is Canadian. Stop trying to claim otherwise. She's ours. Now look at that. I got one more. At Canada. Watch out for falling hockey pucks, folks. That's great. Well, that's it for the headlines portion of my show. That was rapid, wasn't it? Don't you feel like sometimes there's just too much shit going on in the world? It can be overwhelming to keep up with the news cycle. It can create such a short memory. It's as if every time a police officer goes unpunished for murdering citizens, like Tamir Rice, the 12-year-old in Cleveland that was shot by 2 officers when he was seen waving a pellet gun. I'd say get your shit together, Cleveland, which is easy, but our country seems to ignore the cases such as the shooting of Tamir Rice are representative of a larger systemic issue. But I'm coming up with reasons to not read the news, and that's not me. So let's get to our main story today, the power of protest. Woo! You heard me. Today we're going to discuss the power of protest and why discussing racial affairs and color still matters. Coming from a white guy, so strap in. Certain people may want to still paint their picture of the world with broad strokes, campaigning the idea that we are always progressing. But not us. Progress is a myth. We here at WITW like to paint a portrait with a copious palette. Or let's see here. Let me paint a little bush, and a little lake, and a little family of ducklings by the water. And how about this? A prison with police brutality. Look at the blood and the vomit and the diarrhea on the walls. Oh, and how about this? They're taking away all the abortion clinics. Oh, what a beautiful painting of America. So recognizing diversity is essential, and people may want to avoid talking about race due to fear of being perceived as racist or trying to start trouble. But like any repression, if hidden aspects of our society go unexamined, then you're going to play that shit out like you're in a bad relationship. Or, like me, you're going to find yourself eating microwave burritos at 3 a.m., moistening them with your tears. When it comes to race, it is certain that certain groups, namely blacks, are treated differently. I'm white, and I'm sorry if that's breaking news, but I was born with privilege. And I recognize that it was a process to see other people have it much harder than I do. Saying black people carry extra burdens is just as true as saying the sun is hot or Oprah's ass has cellulite. The way our society marginalizes the black community is what currently drives American protests, like shutting down Lakeshore Drive, which we saw last week. Talking protests is especially important and a relevant topic with the copious examples peppered around the globe seen on our screens today. For example, we have seen in Hong Kong from the Umbrella Revolution, where student protesters are fighting for the right to vote for candidates of their own choosing, and not ones selected by the corrupt leaders. Thousands of Chinese protesters have been on the streets for months, often getting tear gas and pepper spray. So maybe China isn't so different from us. We have also seen hundreds of thousands of people in Brazil take to the streets on an almost daily basis to combat the violence, fraud, and poverty in their country. The same place that hosted the 2014 World Cup also saw 2,000 civilian homicides from police last year. Looking back, that really puts a damper on how much celebrating we did during the World Cup. Now, I don't want to take sides and say the police are the problem and that it's all the fault of this corruption in the department, because cops are following their training and they're getting killed out there too, especially in Brazil, where nearly 500 were killed last year alone. But to those who complain about cops being unfairly chastised, I say this: cops do need to be held to a higher standard. Well, because police are trained to have standards. But what is also true and undeniable is that we are seeing a striking amount of civil unrest around the world. And while there is little chastisement of protests occurring in China and Brazil, here in America, we hate protests. And we got a whole lot of moral midgets condemning protests here, which leads me to Ferguson, Missouri. First off, I want to address what a grand jury is. It's a word that we have heard often when discussing Ferguson incident, as well as the recent incident in New York with Eric Garner, the man who died in the midst of a police chokehold in New York. The police officers responsible for the death of these two black men had the evidence surrounding the incident seen by a civilian board, known as the grand jury, who decides whether or not to press charges against an individual, which means that there would still have to be a trial. So the two most prominent cases were Mike Brown and Eric Garner, and the grand juries in both cases decided not to send the police officers to trial. The thing is, people have trouble with the grand juries as they are presented with evidence by a prosecutor who likely has a strong bias favoring police officers. I think we can all agree that it's difficult to send our friends to trial, which makes the justice system appear unfair. Now, as I've said, we've seen grand juries used in the most talked about protests here in the States, which are those in response to the fatal shooting of black 18-year-old Michael Brown by white police officer Darren Wilson. Yes, I did point out their races because it does matter. It is also important to know that Mike Brown was unarmed. It's like bringing no gun to a gunfight. You're just fucked. Responses to this incident have been incredibly fiery and probably ruined a lot of family Thanksgivings. So maybe your Thanksgiving looked a little bit like this. So just imagine yourself sitting across the table from your Uncle Gary and your Aunt Meredith, and don't forget about Uncle Eddie. Uncle Eddie's falling asleep in the lazy boy chair, and as he's petting the dog the wrong way. But then you listen in to Uncle Gary. Can you pass the potatoes, please? Oh, Gary, put a cork in it. I tried to put a cork in you last night. Oh, stop it. Not at the table. Not at the table, not at the neighbor's house, not in the bedroom. Where am I supposed to do it, Meredith? Oh, calm down. Where's the shredded possum? You drank it all already. So, did anyone hear about Ferguson? Those people are acting like thugs. The cop was just doing his job. Why is everyone attacking police officers? They're trying to make this a white and black thing.
Oh, I know they're trying to make it the white and black thing. You know what? Even my black coworkers say the same thing. It's not a racial issue. The cop was just doing his job.
And that Mike Brown kid, he was a thug. He robbed the liquor store. I'm sorry, it's bringing up a lot of bad memories. That was my Thanksgiving. Exactly. Thanksgiving, where turkeys are stuffed with drunken relatives and casual racism. Happy holidays from WITW. If you went out this Thanksgiving, you may have experienced your nutty neoconservative aunt say they're on Darren Wilson's side, or that Ferguson isn't an issue of race. And if you didn't hear it in person, you probably heard it on Facebook. And if you haven't checked Facebook, don't. It's a fruit salad of fuck. You thought your family was just jolly alcoholics. But as many of us saw, there's still a lot of ignorance buried deep in there, like pennies in the couch cushion. And in all of us, including me, there is a need to become more aware of our social ignorance. If you're a caring person and you heard some hateful, racist things spouted by relatives during Thanksgiving, then just remember what Jedi Master Yoda said.
Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hatred. And hatred leads to suffering.
That's why today we are going to bypass the grand jury decision to free Officer Darren Wilson, and we're going to bypass the moralism of trying to shame the people that are rioting and looting, which has always been an ingredient in social protest, I might add, and we're going to instead dig a little deeper. I fear for the Facebook family here. They may not like what happens when you cut past the top layer to see those rotting fillings inside this pie. I call it the status quo pie. It looks safe and charming on the surface, like something Auntie Meredith made and pulled out of the oven, where she dabbles a little cinnamon and nutmeg on top. But take something sharp, like a kitchen knife, and cut into that pie and see that it's riddled with blood, loose limbs, garbage, and my lost copy of Space Jam. Fuck you, Auntie Meredith. Don't try to feed me this garbage. What's wrong with you? So here in Ferguson, we have pie too. The surface of the pie says rioting and looting are bad, and the police officers are only doing their job. So the people of Ferguson need to just stop acting like thugs. But then you have a conflict, as in this case was the fight between Michael Brown and Darren Wilson, which ended in homicide. That's the knife in this metaphor. Mike Brown's death was a lightning bolt, delivered by Thor himself, breaking open the pie, where we found, as Charles Blow says, the deep and ancient anguish of the black community. Blacks didn't earn civil rights until the 1960s, and that was nearly 50 years ago. Only 50 years ago, I might add. Even more recently, a former mayor, Cory Booker, wrote about his experiences as a black man shopping. He said jewelry stores would lock their cases when he entered, and he was often followed when in the mall. We are hardly removed from a sickly racist America, and we've got a long way to go, people. It's important to take time away from our glorious notions of America as a country and see the macabre inner workings. You see the maintenance of everything looking good? When people try to moralize the Ferguson situation to shut people up by keeping it simple. Riots are bad, cops are doing their best, and you shouldn't provoke a police officer, or he'll kill you. That's a nice lesson, isn't it? So next time you're jaywalking like Michael Brown was, don't be black. I admit tragedy strikes all humans of all races, languages, and sexual persuasions. But the Ferguson situation really is a reminder that we all were born into a world with systematic racism inherited from the past. Ancestors, why you gotta play us like that? Also, this isn't about making white people feel guilty. It's about taking responsibility. You could keep spraying Febreze in your living room, but sooner or later, you're gonna have to move the furniture and see what's stinking under the couch. So, let's dig deeper into Darren Wilson. the officer who killed Mike Brown, and explore some of the comments he made in court. The grand jury ruled that Darren Wilson's recollection of what happened on August 9th will be the court's version of the truth, which, I don't know, seems a little biased. Anyways, it's very interesting and enlightening to see how far back some of the comments Officer Wilson made go. Lauren Wilson from Vox, that's V-O-X, points out the racially driven fear-mongering in Darren Wilson's own words. Wilson said when he was trying to handle Mike Brown that it felt like a 5-year-old holding on to Hulk Hogan. And Darren Wilson also said Mike Brown looked like a demon. Darren Wilson was also worried that a punch to his head would kill him. So, Officer Wilson painted Mike Brown as some sort of supervillain that was impervious to bullets, and not some portly pothead who likes taking shortcuts across the street. People will fight for decades over how Mike Brown is supposed to be perceived. He's either a thug, a bully, a gentle giant, or, a human being. Lots of people say Mike Brown was troubled, and not the perfect victim, which are basically excuses to blame him for dying. But Mike Brown also looks similar to Eric Garner, the 43-year-old man who is also very large and black, who was complaining to a police officer before getting choked and dying on a populated sidewalk in New York. We have to discriminate our perceptions and recognize when our thoughts are historic, racist gobbledygook. Such is the case in the superpowered Negro cliche. For example, people perceive me in lots of ways too. As a newsman, a hipster, a pizza aficionado, a hater of Nickelback, a sweetheart, or Jake Gyllenhaal. Fuck that. I am not Jake Gyllenhaal. Jake Gyllenhaal is 6 foot even. I got 2 inches on that Donnie Darko motherfucker. Did you see Jake Gyllenhaal's gay cowboy in Brokeback Mountain? You're doing it wrong, Jake. A cowboy's got a buck. The point is, perception is everything, and Darren Wilson's testimony is a cliched perception. The notion of a black person who has superhuman strength is a terribly old stereotype, showing that, indeed, even though many of us will not like to admit it, the Ferguson situation symbolically represents very old racial issues that still persist. The various terms of giant, superpowered black people was something that can be commonly found in the New York Times database from the early 20th century. Also, Jesse Singal from The Science of Us said that whites are quicker to associate blacks than whites with superhuman words like ghost, paranormal, and spirit. These type of racial biases can trick us, perceiving a higher degree of danger than what is real. One popular study showed viewers an image of a white man confronting a black man with a knife in a subway. When the viewers were later asked about the image, 59% said the black man had held the knife, but in the picture, it was a white man. These sort of studies may show why Darren Wilson feared for his life and made the decision to fire several bullets into Mike Brown. And Darren Wilson was freed because the law supports him. An officer of the law is within his rights to use a gun if he fears for his life, which sounds ambiguous. This also may be a clue into why black people are shot by police at a rate 21 times higher than whites. Fear. And why does pointing out Darren Wilson was white matter? Well, the thing is that most of the police are white. Only 3 of Ferguson's 53 police officers are black. This is a problem because white people commit just as many crimes as blacks, but are stopped at a hugely smaller rate. The St. Louis Dispatch pointed out that for the 11th time in the past 14 years, the measurement for potential racial profiling has gotten worse. This may explain the huge gap between the responses of whites and blacks in the Mike Brown decision. Polls show that 66% of blacks polled disagreed with the grand jury decision, while only 22% of whites disagreed. Blacks and Latinos are stopped by police at a rate 66% higher than whites, even though whites are carrying contraband at a higher rate. This goes to show that the issue is much larger than Darren Wilson and Mike Brown or Eric Garner. For individuals growing up, the racial disparities start as early as grade school. we are now going to look back at the racial disparities that are shared between our nation's educational system and criminal justice system. I hate to say this to you, but it's time to go back to school. Ever since the tragic Columbine shooting in 1999, police patrolling in schools has grown from 1% in the 1970s to 40% today. Research shows that a higher police presence in schools creates an environment of repression. The Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights recently did a study on civil rights in the public school system and found similar results to those found in the criminal justice system. The report showed that preschool is not a reality for most people, and students of color are suspended far more often than white students. And students of color also receive lesser experienced faculty members. So again, reports show that people of color are given less resources. And in Ferguson, more than 1/4 of their population is below the poverty line, which is 1.5 times the national rate. Black students are also much more likely to be suspended. And now students who once faced the scrutiny of their principals after causing trouble can now face misdemeanors and fines from the police. Again, these are situations that put undue stress on the shoulders of black students. Mike Brown is a symbol and a martyr. Think for a minute how much extra trouble Mike Brown had growing up. And he also worked his way to graduating high school. He acted out. He was also repressed by his surroundings and carried the weight of ancient structural racism. So, when you ask whether the issue in Ferguson is about race, the answer is yes. The question has been asked, and the science is there to prove it, as indeed true. So we've got a little shit to work out, America. As I mentioned when I opened the show, we've got lots of people taken to the streets. So let's get to talking about how these most recent protests have been working out. Symbolism is strong in the Ferguson protests. The common one is the hands up, don't shoot signal, referring to what some witnesses claim they saw Mike Brown do before getting pummeled with fatal shots. Also, many protesters have spent time sprawled out on floors and streets for 4.5 minutes, mimicking the 4.5 hours Mike Brown spent sprawled in the middle of the street, dead. Even if many people will go to their grave claiming that Darren Wilson did the right thing, laying out bodies in the street for hours is just in bad taste, even if you have no taste. To many, it is important that this movement does not fizzle out. We have already seen in the past that movements in response to killing of Trayvon Martin have fizzled out after a little bit of time. And we see a lot of strong bodies in our society still in New York genocides and other types of shootings. So this is why people continue to protest. One issue facing the particular movement is how to maintain peace, which is impossible when thousands turn violent, looting stores, throwing Molotov cocktails, rocks, and bottles of piss at the police. The movement also needs to find a concrete agenda. What needs to be done? Build a civilian review board, push for minority officers. Doing this will call for bridging gaps between the various groups looking to make a change. Young people have shown they have the energy, but the older civil rights activists have more of the know-how. But the problem is getting the old and the young to come to any sort of agreement. One tactic that groups have tried is to stop Black Friday sales. The market is our God, and if people want overhauls in the justice system, then stopping shopping is what's being pursued. When protests for Trayvon Martin eventually dissipated, it was because there was a lack of connection between the local groups looking to make change. Leaders argue that a broader, sweeping connection will be needed to keep the fire alive. And if the Mike Brown killing teaches us anything, it's that there is still a major gap in our society between classes and races. And if gone unexplored, then we may very well continue to lose more lives in a sickly, unjust way. And when it comes to criticizing police, it is possible to simultaneously condemn the actions that have gone over the line and also respect police officers for their work and sacrifice. Just like you can condemn your partner for getting out of bed at 2 a.m. and snacking on junk food. I'm speaking of my cat, of course. The thing is, seeing things from only one perspective is rigid and something crazy people do. And America is going to need more than an Advil to clear this cold. Okay. Let's pick up the energy a little bit, shall we? This next portion of the show is known as Sense or Nonsense. It's a game where I will read a story lead, and you'll all yell sense or nonsense depending on whether or not you think it to be true or false. I got a hot date later, so let's make it quick.
Nonsense.
Sense or nonsense? Research shows. Research from who? Some fucking nerds in white lab coats, that's who. Have said that premature ejaculation leading to pregnancy does in fact not correlate with premature babies. Sense or nonsense?
Nonsense. Yeah.
Nonsense.
Yeah.
No study of this was done, but sexual repression is something your grandparents can't wrap their mind around still. Sense or nonsense? Caleb Wilde is a sixth-generation funeral director. Death becomes him, but whoever said that death can't be funny? Caleb ties the shoelaces together of all the bodies coming through because, according to him, if there's ever a zombie apocalypse, it'll be hilarious.
Sense. Yes.
Mr. Wilde's goal is to better help people develop a healthy relationship with death, so that we can become more human. And human means when you're dead, you're dead. You're gonna rot away, and squirrels are gonna piss on your remains. But eventually, you'll grow into a petunia. Sense or nonsense? The American Coalition of Wildlife banned the American Coalition of Wildlife banned the mistreatment of the Illinois duck community because too many children have been seen trying to noogie ducks. The ACWL said that this treatment of native waterfowl is egregiously sick, and that any child seen giving ducks a noogie will be indicted at the scene of the crime.
Sense.
Nonsense.
Can we zoom in a little bit? If you want to give a duck a noogie, I don't give a shit. It's fun. They like it. Okay, let's zoom out. Sense or nonsense? A San Diego courthouse was evacuated last week after someone spotted an egg-shaped piece of aluminum attached to a cord. The squad that investigated the piece found that it was a regular old vibrator. Sense or nonsense?
Sense. Yeah.
While bomb threats are a threat to be taken seriously, the owner of the vibrator wanted to clarify by saying that the vibrator was a bomb in the bedroom. Boom goes the dynamite. Sense or nonsense? Back at Saskatoon Tim Hortons, which is a Canadian diner chain, 2 men were arrested for throwing a snake at the Tim Hortons staff. Sense or nonsense? Sense. Once an argument escalated regarding diced onions on a breakfast sandwich, one of the 2 20-year-old culprits pulled a non-venomous garter snake from his pocket and threw it behind the counter. The snake is fine. He was named Outlaw, and he will be released into the wild next spring. Sense or nonsense? The annual Chicago Furry Festival, known as the Midwest Fur Fest, was thrown into unexpected chaos last weekend after chlorine gas was leaked into the hotel.
Sense. No, why not?
Sense. I should know. I was the guy dressed as a blue rabbit. I was in my private room, and I was with an individual who I will know as Twinkle Fox. And we were minding our own business when we were told to evacuate. Otherwise, I had a good time. Thanks for asking. That's it for Sense or Nonsense. And we'll be back in a minute to interview Karma Wears White Ties.
Woo!